Welcome back. I'm still with Leslie Maasdorp. He's the Chief Financial Officer of the New Development Bank. He's based in Shanghai, China, but back home here in South Africa, talking to us from our Cape Town studios. Now, you are in infrastructure and development funding as the bank. Just tell me about how you are rethinking your operations as the New Development Bank, given the health scare and the lessons that are coming through. I have a sense that you probably are intervening in China one way or another and are looking at ways and means of assisting your member countries in case something like this happens in those countries, including South Africa.
Absolutely, Tim. I mean, as you know, development banks like ourselves, World Bank, Africa Development Bank, etc., we have been set up specifically to focus on the public good. We are development finance institutions. We look at development impact and the public good. And therefore, in situations and crises of this kind, this is exactly where we have to step in. We had a conference call with the management of the bank a couple of days ago, because all of us are in the various BRICS countries right now, and we are discussing a package of emergency funding measures together with other institutions, working together with the Chinese government to see how much money we can raise over the next matter of weeks to augment and help the Chinese authorities fight this pandemic. One of the things we intend doing is looking at issuing, for example, a special purpose bond. In other words, raising debt by issuing a NDB bond on the back of our very high and solid credit rating, raising specific funds earmarked for this purpose of fighting the coronavirus. So the bank is in sort of thinking and reflection mode right now. What are the new things we can do to help the Chinese authorities? What this has also done, Tim, it has just elevated the issue around global pandemics as a risk factor. You know, every year around the beginning of the year, the World Economic Forum has a survey that they circulate to CEOs and CFOs globally, and they ask you, what are the key risks you think might affect the global economy during that year? You know, is it deleveraging? Is it potential financial crisis? You know, is it terrorism, etc.? And there's always global pandemics is always on that list, but you know, I've never thought one must make a tick next to that box. You now realize how an external shock like this can have a massive impact on the world economy.
Well, I'm thinking of the Horn of Africa as you're talking about that, and they have a low-cost problem there. I wonder, is it an issue of interest to yourselves as the New Development Bank? Are you paying attention to what is going on in East Africa?
Look, I mean, as you know, the New Development Bank's mandate at this stage is confined to the BRICS countries. So we look very closely in a focused manner at Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Naturally, we look at what's happening in the rest of the world, East Africa, West Africa, and so on. But we look at those more in terms of how it could impact on our member countries. We are confined to focus our efforts, our funding, building of infrastructure to the BRICS countries. Our peer institutions like the Africa Development Bank, the World Bank, they are much more seized with the crises there.
Well, how are we doing then as the member of BRICS? If you compare the performance of our economy to Brazil, to India, and to China, we seem to be the laggards, right? And from the point of view of the bank and the other members, what do they see as South Africa's main challenge? And I'm sure you yourself have got specific views on that.
I think, Tim, when we've had discussions with you before over the last year to 3 years since I've been in China, you know that we have been very concerned with the capacity and the ability of South Africa to expand its infrastructure program. And the concern has mainly been around what has been a weakening in the institutional fabric of our state-owned enterprises over the last number of years. Fortunately, the government has prioritized this and have made significant interventions to improve the governance, change the boards, put more competent people in place at the levels of CEOs, CFOs, making sure that they root out corruption in procurement practices in a lot of these state-owned enterprises. So there's no question that South Africa has gone up the curve in improving its ability to deliver on large infrastructure. That's the first point I'd like to make. Secondly, you know that one of the first things the President did in his first State of the Nation address when he became President was speak about the importance of investment as a critical driver for economic growth. So African economy is underperforming. You would know, Tim, that we went into recession 2009, and for the last 10 years we've hardly grown. We've grown at 1.5%, 1.8%, etc. Not nearly enough to create a number of jobs for our people to feel that they have a stake in this economy. So investment in infrastructure remains a critical lever of growth. So in terms of how South Africa is perceived, I would say we've made progress. In 2019, Tim, we've approved $2.2 billion of loans to South Africa. Now, granted, not all of the money has left Shanghai, because for a whole number of reasons which we can go in another time. But in terms of approved projects, you're going to see from this year significant flows in funding to Development Bank of Southern Africa, to Transnet.
But you know, there's an area of concern as well. There are risks that, you know, in the global context. For instance, I heard that the United States, AGOA, is going to exclude South Africa going forward, that the exemption that we used to enjoy as a country in so many export materials are now going to be taken away from South Africa, and obviously that will undermine the potential growth, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. Look, right now, you know, the economic policymakers in South Africa, the President with all the key ministers have to sit down and look at what are the key, what one can call growth-inducing reforms. As Minister Mboweni talks about structural reforms, I think we need to unpack what are these actual things we can do to stimulate the economy. And Tim, we have to look at low-hanging fruits. What can we do in the short term, in the next 6 months to a year, 18 months to 2 years, to get the growth levers of the economy ticking? Simple things like, you know, tourism, for example, facilitating the visas, maybe e-visas to many countries so that we can have more people see our beautiful shores. You know, for me, coming out of winter in Shanghai a few weeks ago, arriving here in Cape Town and Johannesburg and just seeing our beautiful country, it's always amazing to come back. There's a lot of things we should look at that could have short-term benefits, because I find that we always have these long discussions about big structural things that are medium-term, and then we never get moving.
Leslie Maasdorp, always a pleasure talking to you, and thank you very much for joining us on the Modise Network. I appreciated your time. Thank you.